Welcome to another episode of the Victory Over Vices podcast, brought to you commercial-free by addictionhelp.com. I am your host, Dan Hauser, and today we're going to look at if the PGA Tour has a drinking problem. Let's get into the show. All right, so the events that took place recently at the Waste Management Phoenix Open have made it clear that at the very least, the tournament has a problem when it comes to finding that proper balance between a party atmosphere and a golf tournament. Now, it is the Waste Management Phoenix Open, so they have prided themselves essentially on that party atmosphere with kind of a golf tournament going on in the background. So they've not only advertised it, they've taken pride in it. It has been their thing historically that has separated themselves from the rest of the tour schedule. However, what happened during this year's event has shown that things have officially gone too far. Yes, I understand the weather played a factor in the event itself and everything that transpired. There were a lot of areas that normally, with it being a stadium course where fans could congregate, that they couldn't because everything was mud. They also let everyone come back on Saturday who had tickets for Friday because the round didn't get completed on Friday, despite the fact that they knew that they had sold out of their Saturday ticket allotment, which of course added to a large amount of people on the property at a particular time. However, it had already been a tournament that had been skating kind of on that edge for a really, really long time. And so this particular year, it went over the edge, as we saw, where they actually had to close the gates on Saturday. They had to have people leave the property. They had to shut off alcohol sales. And so all that being said, the historical success of the Waste Management Phoenix Open has led to other tournaments and other events on the PGA Tour trying to kind of replicate what they do and lean into that whole party with a golf tournament happening in the background type theme. We've seen many other tournaments where they've tried to have their party holes or their holes where they want everyone to find their way to, like we see with the 16th at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. As a result of all that, though, one could argue that now more than ever, going to a PGA Tour event is a social gathering where everyone drinks, parties, have fun. And oh yeah, by the way, there just so happens to be a professional golf tournament being played in the background. So all this is to say, does the PGA Tour have a drinking problem? When we come back, we are going to try to answer that question and touch on some other topics happening right now in the world of golf with my guest this week, former competitive golfer, Chipper Keener. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the show. As I mentioned, I am joined today by Chipper Keener. He is a former competitive golfer, a fellow golf sicko such as just like me, and a golf traditionalist who has been very closely following the golf boom that has been happening over the past several years here post-COVID. Chipper, thanks for coming on the show today. Yeah,
thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I teased it a little bit in the intro, but let's just get right into it. The craziness, I guess you could say, that was the 2024 edition of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Now, this tournament has traditionally been one that has taken great pride in being not your grandfather's or not your father's PGA Tour event. They lean very heavily into the come here, it's a party, it's a fun time, everyone hang out, and by the way, we also have a professional golf tournament happening when you come here. This year, though, was particularly interesting, and quite literally, it was a perfect storm of events that led to it. We had a lot of bad weather early in the week, which left parts of the golf course, I guess you could say, unusable for a lot of the fans. And it is a stadium style course, so it's designed for everyone to kind of be spread out and to enjoy sitting around. And there was a lot of areas they couldn't. On top of that, because of the bad weather early in the week, it led to the second round not finishing on Friday, meaning that anyone who had second round tickets were able to come back on Saturday for the completion of play, but they didn't make them leave once the second round ended. Couple that with the fact that the third round for that Saturday was already a complete sellout, and you had just way too many people in a very confined environment at once with a lot of alcohol sales going on, which we'll get to in a minute because that's also a big thing of theirs. As a result, they had to close the gates down. There were people that actually had third-round tickets that couldn't get in because they didn't show up at 5 a.m., basically. They cut off alcohol sales, and they had to eventually get to a point where they had to have people leave the property because there were just too many on the property. As somebody, like I mentioned, you're a golf sicko like me. You follow this stuff very closely. What was kind of going through your mind kind of in real time as the scenes of Saturday were playing out.
Yeah, it's it's funny you're wearing a hat from Augusta. I remember I got to go to the Masters in 2005, watch Tiger win. I went to the final round, and we got there at right when the gates open, and the first thing they say to you is, if you're caught running, you will be removed from the premises and your credentials will be taken from you. And to think about that dichotomy to watching people like get in track stances and start sprinting through the gates Saturday morning, probably maybe have slept a couple hours. It's just the variance of the tournament in itself. And, honestly, I've been to the Waste Management. I used to work at TPC Scottsdale. I was an apprentice at the Tour Academy out there. So spent a lot of time out there. Actually got to walk inside the ropes. And I mean, this was 12 years ago and it was still crazy. But I think now, just with the magnification of hole number 16 and kind of the whole People's Open vibe that they want to create there, it's unfortunately going to be part of the game of golf, I think, from a professional standpoint. But I also view it this year as, to your point, it's a perfect storm. People are caring less about golf, the game, and more golf, like the environment, like the party environment. And so it's attracting a different demographic. I spoke to some people that were there this year. None of them said they would return based on their experience. And that's an unfortunate thing. But for every old schooler like you and me, there's going to be 5 or 6, new people that are going to be wanting to experience that for the party aspect. And I don't really think they care about our opinion. It's just going to continue to happen. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned the contrast there. Both the PGA Tour and the tournament itself lean into that. They post videos all over social media of all these people lined up at 4 a.m. and getting into their track stances and running in and already drinking their beers. So it's interesting that, and we'll see what happens next year. But up until this year, that was, like I mentioned, that was kind of a thing that they prided themselves on. It's also led to a lot of spinoffs, specifically down here where I'm at in South Florida. This year it's now the Cognizant Classic. I think I'll always refer to as the Honda, but the Honda built the Bear Trap out, and so they basically turned 17 into their own version of 16 in Phoenix. And we've seen in the last couple of years, since the tour shrunk their schedule so they could get done before football season gets going, and with the elevated events, the Honda has found itself, and I'm sure it's a big reason why Honda itself is not a presenting sponsor anymore. They found themselves in a tough position of kind of being that event sandwiched in between two bigger events where a lot of guys are skipping. But it's interesting because I think for a lot of people that go to that event, I don't think they really care, and I don't think they could tell you who 5 people are out there anyway, because they're not going for that. They're going to sit in the Bear Trap all day, and they're going to hang out. And listen, for what it's worth, and I think you would agree with me, one of the great things about golf is that it's traditionally, well, not traditionally, it's always an outdoor sport, but it is traditionally a sport that quote-unquote follows the sun. It tends to be played in warm weather environments, and whether that be year-round or they set the schedule up so every time they get to somewhere, it's typically in their nicer time of the year. So for people, especially in areas not like us that are in Florida where we can enjoy this weather year-round, for a lot of these people, it's a really nice way, especially for them in their spring or early summertime, to get out of the house and get out and enjoy warmer weather, nicer weather, do something outdoors where they haven't been able to do so in several months in areas with more traditional winter climates. So I will give them that too. But at the same time, like you mentioned, for every one of us, there's 10 more people that are going because it's just something outdoors to do with their friends where they can go and drink and have fun. And hey, maybe if they watch a couple of golf shots, then cool. And if they don't, they're still spending their $12 on a beer and $17 on a mixed drink, and everyone's still getting their money no matter what.
Yeah, I think from a tour perspective, there used to be more, like, the corporate aspect was almost in a more confined space. So like, I'm in Jacksonville Beach, so I've been going to the Players since I was a kid. And I remember, like, late teens, early 20s, like, you wanted a benefactor ticket because the benefactor chalet was on 17, and it was like the only place you could get, liquor and not just beer. You could get that party environment, stop in, like cool off because it was, especially when it was in May, it was hot. But now they're kind of leaning into that as well, where there's food trucks everywhere and there's bars and there's a signature drink at the Players now called the Sawgrass Splash. I've never had one, but it's definitely something that more and more tournaments, and I think the PGA Tour itself they're just leaning into. Hey, we want to try to toe that line between, just a full on party scene and attracting more people to the game of golf. So I don't disagree with 100% of what they're doing, but I just think it's part of the culture now of how golf is kind of being viewed as a hobby, as an event, as something for people to do. To your point, I mean, the reason so many people live in Phoenix for half the year is because they used to have the skins game out there in the late 80s, and they edited the color of the grass to make it greener, so that all these people that are sitting in snow around Thanksgiving are like, oh, where is this? I need to get there because it's so green. And I'm sitting out looking out my window and it's white and gray and gross. So, it's a marketability thing, but at the same time, like, you're going to go too far and then it's going to have to right size itself, or it's going to go away. That's my opinion.
And I will say, we've crapped on it a little bit, but credit to the Thunderbirds, who are the organizing body of the event. They came out the day after the completion of the tournament and basically said what happened Saturday was not okay. We're going to spend the next 364 days figuring out how to make it better for everyone, where those who want to be out there just to party and hang out can still do that, while those who actually want to watch the golf tournament can do so and feel safe doing so. And also the players will feel safe and okay playing in the event, because we saw two specific instances on that Saturday. Billy Horschel and Zach Johnson have to essentially, I don't want to say get in the faces of fans that were out there, but they had to say something to them and they weren't nice about it, and it caused back and forth. And obviously it's another bad look on social media because you don't want to see that happening between the pros and the fans. But you have to wonder too, do the Thunderbirds have to do something, and maybe all these other tournaments follow suit? Because quite frankly, and yes, I do understand that there are plenty of people out there that have no clue who these guys are, and they wouldn't care if there wasn't an actual golf tournament going on. But the fact of the matter at the end of the day is, for them to be able to still go out there and party, there has to be a golf tournament going on. And for people like you and I, if there's not a golf tournament or a good golf tournament going on, we're not going to go out there. And so they have to make sure that these players keep showing up. Now, that's the other problem.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, that ties into kind of the state of the game right now. I think, myself included, I'm not going to watch the tournament this weekend. I don't even know the course. I don't know 90% of the field. I'm in like a golf survivor pool where you pick one player every week, and Tony Finau is the defending champion, and I don't recognize 90% of the field, so I'm going to go ahead and pick Tony Finau. But like, I'm not going to sit around and build my weekend around watching this tournament in Mexico. And I think, unfortunately, the other side of that is there are so many good golfers now. There are so many people that can go out and win week to week on the PGA Tour, and that creates a lot of parity. And similar to what you're seeing in other sports, like I would compare it almost to college football now with NIL, where you're getting programs from kind of unknowns. Like nobody watched Washington unless they lived in the Pacific Northwest for the last 10 years, and they've been to 2 college football playoffs in the last few years, and but at the same time, like, nobody from my neck of the woods is going to be like, oh wow, I really like that Washington program, I'm going to start following them full time. So you see the guys that are coming out and winning, and especially this year, like, even the events that we had, like a couple birdie fests. Like, I don't like watching guys shoot 30 under. I enjoyed watching, I'm blanking on his name, but the amateur that won in Palm Springs, I went to Alabama, he went to Alabama. So that was kind of cool to see. But at the same time, like, Wyndham Clark winning on a shortened event at Pebble Beach, and that had a lot of weather. You didn't see people sliding down hills at Pebble Beach. And Riviera kind of last week was the same way. Like, it wasn't it wasn't the leaderboard that we wanted, and it wasn't, you had Tiger withdraw, you had Spieth get DQ'd, Jordan Thomas missed the cut. I mean, Justin Thomas missed the cut. And you got Hideki and Patrick Cantlay. Like I won't watch Patrick Cantlay if he's playing on the Ryder Cup team. So and that's just kind of the state of the game.
Hideki coming from 9 shots back though, that was pretty exciting to watch. Now, granted, I was pulling for Zalatoris. For certain reasons, but that was cool seeing Hideki come from. I don't even think that nobody was even paying attention to him, and then all of a sudden there he is, 1 shot back, and then tied for the lead, and then leading, and then his back-to-back collective 18 inches from the hole on 16 and 7 or 15 and 16. So that part at least was a little bit fun. And it got Patrick Cantlay out of the equation quickly.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, that's the other unfortunate thing about the Waste Management too, because that was such a fantastic finish. You had Charlie Hoffman come out, who always plays well at that event, lives in the area. I think he's either in Vegas or Scottsdale. But and then you had the guy coming 3 shots back with 5 to go, and you got 2 par 5s, and you got a drivable par 4, and it's set up to be such a good finish. And then, to have Nick Taylor come birdie 18 to get into a playoff, and then birdie 18, both the guys birdie the first playoff hole, then he birdies it again. Like, that's a great, my buddy and I were actually flipping back and forth between the Super Bowl and the finish. Well, I mean,
it didn't help that because all the weather delays, they didn't get that in before kickoff. So I mean, right. I can't imagine why people tuned out or turned it off before the most exciting part of the weekend even happened.
Yeah, that was the good thing about me not being in a giant Super Bowl party was me, my buddy, and our significant others, and they didn't care about golf or football, so we could do whatever we wanted. But
you mentioned too about how deep golf is, and that's what's interesting is that for those golf sickos like you and I, men's professional golf has never been deeper. But unfortunately, because of LIV and everything going on with the tour trying to combat LIV and these signature events and basically creating this closed off system, it's also never been less interesting to follow week in and week out. You mentioned I'm not going to watch Mexico. I mean, I'll tune into the Cognizant Classic mostly just because I'm going to be out there on Saturday for a couple hours. So like, I'll want to know who makes the cut, so I know who I want to maybe follow around a little bit on Saturday. But other than that, it's tough to watch men's professional golf these days. And so I do understand where the tour is at, because you have the people like us that they've been relying on as far as like their gate for as long as their existence is saying, well, we don't like you guys right now. We don't like LIV right now. We hate all of us right now. We're not going. So they've got to figure out new revenue streams. So yes, I understand where it's like, okay, let's appeal to the people that are and we'll talk about this a little more in a minute, but the people that are the quote unquote COVID effect golfers, the ones who started playing golf or started getting into golf because it was one of the few things they could do during COVID, or they started getting into things like Top Golf and Drive Shack because they could go out with their friends on a Friday night and have a couple drinks or two and have some food, and they could hit some balls into some targets. And now it's like, okay, well, let's go check this out. And I understand wanting to appeal to them, but at the same time, and I don't really know what the answer is. I think if any of us knew what the answer really was, we would all be very rich right now, because we could go to these entities and say, this is the answer. Do you put limits on drinks that people can get when they're in there? But then, of course, if you have a group of 15 people, everyone can go max it out and just bring it back to their buddies, and then you still really can't monitor it that way anyway. You actually did bring up the kind of the COVID effect, if you will. So why don't you kind of explain that? I know I did a little bit, but maybe you want to explain that a little bit more as far as how that's kind of also played into where we're at now too, as far as golf fandom goes.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a perfect storm, right? Like 2019, you had Tiger win the Masters, and it was like golf is back. Like Tiger's back, golf is back. It was super exciting for me. Tiger was my idol growing up. And then, obviously the COVID hits in 2020, and, you're watching, Morikawa win a PGA in San Francisco with no fans, and Dustin Johnson blow out Augusta in November with no fans, Bryson winning the US Open. I mean, so you had these big names, right? And then, 2021, Tiger gets injured, in the car accident. And it's almost like, he was kind of, the way I view it is he was kind of the shepherd to the flock. Like you have the Rory and the Jordan and the JTs and these other really talented people, but they weren't the same draw as Tiger, but they looked up to Tiger, they followed Tiger. So I think one thing they didn't really obtain from Tiger in Tiger's prime was how to be that entertainer. Jordan can get excitable sometimes. JT, obviously, I think JT wears his emotions on his sleeve, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Rory's kind of the same way, but in terms of what golf is today, like you're not going to watch somebody win 8 PGA Tour events in a row. You're not going to see anybody else win 15 majors. They've said it about certain people. Like Rory McIlroy hasn't won a major since 2008. He's talked about it every single major, and he hasn't won one. He's been in contention, right? So that makes things interesting, but he has not won since 2008. And Tiger kind of went through that, from the '05 Masters, to '08, right? And then now kind of pushing all the way through with his injuries. But, it's kind of a rudderless ship. So Tiger, to me, like I wanted to be able to go follow Tiger. I went to events to follow a specific player. Greg Norman back in the day, Freddie Couples, Payne Stewart. Like I would get a pairing sheet, figure out where I'm going to meet up with this group and go follow that group for 3 or 4 hours. It wasn't, well, let me get a drink and go sit by and watch them come through 16 and 17. And I think that's where, especially now with it being a nice and outdoor event and the warm weather and all the things you touched on, that's what a golf tournament has turned into. You're going to have people just sitting around in their lawn chairs or whatever they're able to sit on and just kind of watching random players walk by. And it's a totally different vibe from the way it was before. And, the COVID thing with golf, I think the PGA of America did a fantastic job marketing golf as a safe outlet during the pandemic to get outside and go be social and be with your friends and use that for 4 or 5 hours to get out and get out of the house. But now it's kind of just like the other things we've discussed. It hasn't right-sized itself to kind of come back to even par, right? Like we're way far over here, and I just don't view it as something they view as worth fixing, because it is bringing in, the PGA Tour is the PGA Tour, but PGA of America and the golf industry as a whole is, bringing in more money than it ever has because of these new golfers. And, somebody like me, I've got my one set of clubs. I'll buy a new driver every few years. I bought a new set of irons last year. I won't buy another set. I mean, I had my last set for 10 years. Get a putter maybe every 3 or 4 years, but you're bringing in somebody who wants to be good. They still sell the dream of, if you buy the best equipment, your game will be better than if you buy like a Walmart knockoff. So you've got these people coming in and spending $4,000 or $5,000 to get into the game, probably joining a club, or if not, public golf is more expensive than it's ever been. So there's all of that to be taken into consideration too. But to get back to the point of the PGA Tour events or the live events, all of those golfers that are going out to drink cocktails and, do whatever else they're doing on the golf course, those are the ones that are going to the tour events now, right? So it's, hey, we get to do the same thing we're doing on the golf course. We just don't have to hit a shot. I mean, I started playing golf at 9 years old. I don't think I even drank on a golf course until I was like 24 or 25, because I wanted to play to the best of my ability. And I didn't think that drinking alcohol, I mean, that's a story for another day, but alcohol it's not a performance enhancer. And so if you really care about getting better at the game of golf, you're not going to go out and get blasted. But that's kind of the main thought process now. It's like, I need some swing oil, or, I have to have a couple cocktails to relax, That's,
yeah, for me, it was when I got to college, but and even not all the time. It was more like if I was going out with my buddies to play around. Okay, because you're not really keeping score, or not really keeping as much track. But yeah, if I was going out to play by myself, even in college and into my 20s, like yeah, because I was keeping score, I was tracking how many putts I was, and whatnot. So I think it also depends on the people you're out playing with and the overall plan for that day. I will say one thing too. If you are somebody listening to this and you like to post up with a lawn chair in between holes 9 and 10 or whatever and just watch people go, we're not saying it's a bad thing. Just make sure you do it responsibly. And I will say too, we are still, for right now, talking about a minority. Most people, even if they're out there to just enjoy being outside and they don't really care as much about the tournament as, say, people like you and I, they are still doing it in a way that's not hindering the enjoyment of anybody else. I mean, it is still, for the moment, a minority. It is growing into a larger and larger minority, and I think that's our point here. But for the moment, it is still somewhat of a minority, and I think that the key is to make sure it doesn't grow into that majority.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a tournament to tournament base, if you're taking it from data point to data point, right? Like the waste management is far to this side of the extreme. And you can see it. If it was really a trend that was super dangerous, it would have translated over to Riviera last week. It would translate. I mean, it'll
to
be
places like Pebble.
Yeah, it'll be like there will be those people everywhere, but you're not. It's not going to be, chastising players and talking trash. And I mean, I saw video of guys fighting in Phoenix, like full on bar brawl. And I've never seen that before. So
the mud sliding down the hills. I mean, yeah, yeah.
I've seen that at 17 at Sawgrass too. I mean, you get that
if it's raining,
a little bit of rain, and you can have sober people bust their ass.
Especially back when the players were still in May. I feel like it rained pretty much every year when it was in May, because obviously that time of year in this part, in Florida, it's raining every day,
right?
Which is part of the reason too why they moved it back to March. But no, of course, and sober. You said yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean you're drunk. Sober people do it too, but it's liabilities that don't need to be there. There's already enough liabilities on a golf course when you're at a professional golf tournament as a fan. I mean, you could just be sitting there minding your own business and get nailed by a team. I mean, there's already so much that could go wrong. Why go out of your way to add more to it?
Yeah. I think it's just like anything else, it's the identity of it, right? Like I saw a hat for sale, and it literally says "The People's Open" on a hat for Phoenix, and that's just like, I think people in general right now, they want to feel empowered. They want to feel like they're more important than they are. And so being able to come out and be like, yeah, I'm at the People's Open and I'm going to celebrate. And I deserve this. I earned this,
Well, correct me if I'm wrong too. I believe that there was a shirt this year, if not in years past too, that basically says, I survived 16 at the waste management, to imply like I was out there all day getting bombed and I made it out alive. So,
Yeah.
Also, it's funny we're talking about this like golf's the only sport where people drink at. I mean, obviously it's not the case. Go to any sporting event, football, hockey, baseball, basketball, there's bars, there's concession stands with alcohol being served. In NBA arenas these days, they have those courtside clubs where everyone goes and they drink. You were mentioning college football. I'm a Miami Hurricane season ticket holder down here. You've been to your fair share of college football games, going to Alabama, pro games as well. We both live in a city where there's an NFL team. You go to a football game, and there are people, not so much in the NFL because you can only tailgate for 4 hours, but in most college towns, you can tailgate for, when I was in college, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. And people are drinking, and they're drinking all day before these games, and they are drinking a lot before these games. But I think the one difference overall that you can say with football or basketball or whatnot compared to, say, golf where we're at now is, sure, these people might be tailgating for a football game for 7 hours, getting as drunk as humanly possible. But once they get into that stadium, they are all there for one reason, and it is to watch that football game. That's not the case with golf right now. Not everyone is there to actually watch the tournament. And when you have... and in the case of Phoenix, when you have more people that are not to watch the golf, than there are to watch the golf. That's where situations arise where guys are yelling in people's backswings. There's all out bar brawls. There are, they're treating hills as mud pit slides while there's golfers trying to earn a living on the golf course. And I think that's where, once again, we keep bringing it up. There's that line, and clearly Phoenix crossed it this year. Now it's a matter of what does both that particular tournament and the tour overall do to make sure that it doesn't become the norm.
I think, first of all, Phoenix has, like I said, I was there. I lived out there. I went to the 2010 and 2011 Phoenix Open while I was out there, and leaving that place logistically, it's still a bottleneck to get out of there. It still takes forever if you stay till the end of the tournament. But just the fact that it's just being magnified every year, and they're selling more tickets, and they've got more corporate stuff and everything. It's going to get to a breaking point. The thing with other sports, and I was thinking about this earlier, when I go to a football stadium, whether or not I'm drinking or not, nowadays it's not, I'm going to see my favorite team play, and I know the players that are playing on that team, and I'm going to sit there for 3 or 4 hours and watch those players that I came to watch. With golf, if you're truly a fan, in my opinion, you're going to want to follow people throughout the golf course and watch every shot. That's the benefit of going to a live event rather than watching it on TV. Phoenix was built as a stadium environment similar to Sawgrass to house a lot of people that want to watch a lot of golf. But if you're just sitting there and you're watching, 150 players on Thursday and Friday come through one hole, and you're watching them hit 1, 2, or 3 golf shots, you're not really a fan. You're sitting there just kind of in my opinion, you're taking up space. Is it wrong? No. But if you're just doing that to sit there and have some pops and catch a buzz, then it's not the game of golf that I grew up with. It's not the game of golf that I would want to teach to somebody that was interested in the game. I'm taking my girlfriend to the Players this year. She probably watched one golf tournament with her father at one point in time, but has never been to an event. And we're not going to sit around and sit on 17 all day. That's just the way that it is. And so I think comparing golf to other sports is difficult because you've got so many things that you can do. But at the same time, if you're a fan and you're a fan of a player, then you want to follow that player. And in my opinion, you're not going to want to stop at a beer tent every 2 minutes to go grab another one because you want to watch, Rory McIlroy bomb a drive 340 on the next hole, right? What's more important to you?
Also, and not to make complete light of it too, but if you're grabbing a beer every 2 minutes, you're also having to use the bathroom a lot. And anyone who's been at a tour event, the later in the day you get, those things are, you do not want to be stepping foot in those come 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let me tell you. So, that's another thing to keep in mind too, is just to keep drinking and drinking all day. We are getting up against the clock here, so we'll get out on these 2 last questions. The first one, and we've been teasing it since the second the show started. Does the PGA Tour have a drinking problem?
I believe the culture of the PGA Tour fan is becoming less and less respectful of the traditions of the game of golf. So I think that ties into, yes, I believe it has a drinking problem. And I believe it's just the demographic of the people that are coming to these events and that are picking up the game. So I don't think it's 100% a bad thing. I just think it needs to be leveled out and right sized for the course of benefiting the future of the game from a spectator standpoint. If you want to go out to your local muni and drink a 12-pack, I have absolutely no problem with that. Just call an Uber on your way home. But if you're going to go out and interfere with this sounds selfish, but it's the way it is. You're interviewing with my experience that I came out and paid, X amount of dollars to get a ticket. And if I got to deal with some jerk, screaming mashed potatoes and, spilling drinks on himself and other people, like I'm not gonna really want to take that on too much longer.
All right, and final question: Jay Monahan's out, you are in. What do you do to remedy all this, to fix it, or if it's even fixable?
Man, that's a tough question because there's so many things I would do that Jay Monahan hasn't been able to do. The first thing is, I think people care less about golf because they don't care about. People care less about watching golf because they don't care about these millionaires that are complaining about who's making more money and the splits and the cuts and everything else. So the unification of a tour is necessary to bring back the traditional golf fan. I do believe that's going to happen. I think there's going to be some type of like top 80 global tour where everybody from LIV and everybody from the PGA Tour are going to be competing, once or twice a month. I think that's the way it's going to happen. But as of right now, like if I was a drinker and I was going to, I was in Memphis for the St. Jude, and I've got a choice of following around. Maybe I like Will Zalatoris, but he's not that interesting to me. He's a good golfer. But like, am I going to walk around and sweat in August and September and follow him around, or am I going to sit somewhere and just kind of enjoy being outside? I think I'm going to choose the latter. So we need the big names to all be in the big events and competing against each other, because then you'll want to watch those guys go blow for blow. I mean, that's why the Ryder Cup is such a big event, because you've got 24 players out there that are trying to, kill each other with their game of golf. That's why it's the best event,
No, absolutely. All right, Chipper Keener, thank you so much for being on with me today. We're going to talk to you again here in a couple of weeks, because I know I'm going to have you back here after the Players. We'll get your firsthand account of what it was like being out there at the Players, and we'll also chat a little Masters preview as well too. So thanks for joining me today, and we'll chat again with you here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Had a great time.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much once again to Chipper for joining me, and also thank you to all of you out there for continuing to support the show, for continuing to share this show with your friends, family member, and loved ones. Just a friendly reminder as well, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you are listening to us the old-fashioned way, please subscribe to our podcast feed, whether that's on Spotify or anywhere else you may get your podcasts. I'd also like to take a moment on the way out to just remind everyone that if you or a loved one is struggling, whether that's with addiction, mental health, or both, please go get the help that you need. Please seek professional help. If you aren't sure on where to get started in that process, addictionhelp.com is a great place to get started on that. They have numerous pages that can provide you with more information, whether it's getting the help that you need, learning about certain diagnoses, or even certain warning signs of a potential substance abuse or mental health condition that you may be suffering from. So go ahead and check out addictionhelp.com for that. That'll do it for today's show. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one, everybody.